This is Living Power with Dan Hurst.
I want you to see something that's going on. Take a look at this map. In the area right now, and the news events that we're going to take a look at here in just a few moments, involve so much of Iran. Iran obviously has been in the news, and so this is Iran. Here's Saudi Arabia. Interestingly enough, Iran and Saudi Arabia are enemies. They don't like each other. And they basically because they're two different sects, S-E-C-T-S, of Muslims. And so Saudi Arabia considers them an enemy. Iran, everybody knows that Iran's pursuing nuclear weapons, and they say it's for peaceful purposes. Well, their concept of peace is that they rule, and so it's their kind of peace, not the kind of peace that everybody else wants. Saudi Arabia has said, look, if you're going to do that, we're going to get nuclear weapons also. The difference is Saudi Arabia says, we'll just buy ours from Pakistan, because Pakistan has nuclear weapons. Now, I don't know of anybody who is watching this who doesn't think that Iran couldn't do the same thing, and maybe already has. Probably not from Pakistan, but from North Korea. Anyway, if you'll notice something, Iran is really involved in Syria. In fact, we'll see something in the news here in just a moment. But Iran is looking to create this swath of land that they can control because it gives them direct access to Israel right there. And they're already in Syria. They're really meddling in Iraq's affairs right now. They're moving down this way around through Oman and Yemen. They want to control the Straits of Hormuz right there. They feel like that's their right, and they plan on controlling that. We'll see that in the news in just a moment. It would not surprise me to see Egypt and Saudi Arabia hook up together to create some sort of pact against Iran. Israel is already discussing matters with Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia has even suggested that they might be willing to give them rights of passage to fly across Saudi Arabia to get to Iran. And then, of course, Russia, all the Russian states and everything that's going on up here, they are connecting with Iran also. So there's this whole thing all surrounding Israel, and we've seen this so many times in the scriptures that when God said, when you see these nations surrounding Israel, look up for your redemption draws nigh. Well, that's happened, and Israel is already surrounded, and it's just a powder keg right now. So as we look at some news, keep this in mind, all of this that's going on. And I want you to see some of these things in the news. First of all, the Islamic Temple Mount preacher by the name of Sheikh Khaled al-Mughrabi, he teaches religious classes at the Al-Aqsa Mosque right there in Jerusalem, which is right on the Temple Mount. And he said on May the 29th in one of his teachings, he said that Jews make Passover matzah from the blood of children. This is the kind of stuff that they're teaching their children. They're teaching their children that this is how Israel is. This is how the Jews are. They do this. And it's just fear-mongering is really all it is. But that's what they're doing. And he explained that the Jews were the ones that were behind the September 11th attacks on the U.S. Now, all of these religious lessons that are taught in mosques are supervised by the Palestinian Authority. So this is what's going on in these mosques as they're teaching their children. They're teaching them these things, these principles. And to teach that that Jews make Passover matzah from the blood of children is just horrific. But that's what they're doing. That's what they're teaching in some of those mosques. Second piece of news. Obama is raising the possibility of allowing the UN vote on Palestinian statehood. This is a huge, huge, dangerous step. President Obama took a step toward a tougher line with Israel in an interview released on Tuesday, raising the possibility that the U.S. will allow a United Nations vote on issues related to the Palestinians if the two sides make no meaningful movement toward peace. Really what he's doing, and he's not the only one, I mean, Congress is doing this also, they're basically just getting to the point where they're so frustrated they can't accomplish anything, so they're just saying, fine, we'll just turn it over to the United Nations, let them deal with it. Well, you know what's going to happen if that happens. The United Nations is so anti-Israel anyway. So they're making these choices that basically gives them permission to wash their hands of the situation and walk away from it. But I want to go on with that news story. In an interview with an Israeli television station, Obama noted that his administration has, up until this point, quashed such efforts at the UN while insisting that the Israelis and Palestinians must negotiate a resolution. But he said it is a challenge for the U.S. to keep demanding that the Palestinians negotiate in good faith if no one believes the Israelis are doing the same. So, thank you so much. Appreciate that. So there's this shift in policy, if you will, that says, look, we're just going to, if you guys don't want to get together, then we're just going to turn it over to the United Nations. We're not going to be involved in this, meddling in these affairs, because we have no way of controlling this, and you're not responsive to the efforts that we make, and basically putting the blame on, really on the Israelis. I mean, that's who Obama was telling us to. A third piece of news. In the Pentagon, Iran is continuing to work on nuclear systems. This is a report that was in the Washington Free Beacon just a couple of days ago. Iran is continuing to develop missiles capable of delivering nuclear weapons despite an interim agreement on its nuclear programs. Remember that big thing that they had? Went to the table in Oslo and had all this agreement. This is what's going to happen, all the peace, and there will be a, we're going to stop, there's a freeze on all the development and so forth and so on. Now we're realizing there's no freeze on all of that. They're continuing with that. Was anybody surprised? Iran continues to develop its capabilities to control the Strait of Hormuz and avenues of approach in the event of a military conflict, the report said, adding that Tehran is quietly fielding increasingly lethal weapon systems, including more advanced naval lines, small but capable submarines, armed manned aerial vehicles, coastal defense cruise missile batteries, attack craft, and anti-ship missiles. That's a pretty good sign that they think there's going to be a war. Tehran's support for terrorism has not stopped, according to the Pentagon. Iran's covert activities appear to be continuing unabated. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force remains a key tool of Iran's foreign policy and power projection, particularly in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Bahrain, and Yemen. So they're very active in what they're planning on doing and positioning themselves in the Middle East. Final piece of news. Iraq and Iran fighters deployed to defend Damascus. This is really interesting. Thousands of Iranian and Iraqi fighters have been deployed in Syria in past weeks to bolster the defenses of Damascus and surroundings, a Syrian security source said. Around 7,000 Iranian and Iraqi fighters have arrived in Syria over the past few weeks, and their first priority is the defense of the capital. The larger contingent is Iraqi. The goal is to reach 10,000 men to support the Syrian army and pro-government militias. Iran's official news agency, IRNA, quoted elite Revolutionary Guards General Qassem Soleimani as saying, "In the coming days, the world will be surprised by what we are preparing in cooperation with Syrian military leaders." It's an interesting statement, because what he's saying is, we're involved in Syria. For the longest time, they were saying, no, they weren't involved. They're very involved in what's going on in Syria. They want to uphold the Syrian government. They're siding with the Syrian government because that gives them, remember that map that we had, that gives them control over that. Now they're bringing these Iraqi fighters in to fight in Syria under their banner. It's the Revolutionary Guard that's bringing in these thousands of Iraqi fighters into Syria to fight. Well, they're training them to fight. What do you think they're going to do with them when the battle is over? They go back to Iraq, and now they control them in Iraq. So Iran then has a foothold, this foothold to control Iraq. That gives them control of that swath from Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, down into Israel. That appears to be what their plan is. And they've made no mistake that their intent is to destroy Israel. I mean, they very clearly said that's what they intend to do, is to destroy Israel. So all in the face of all of that comes this time of revelation. And I'm going to introduce our study today, and we're actually going to start getting into some of the verses. But I want you to see the timeline that Revelation talks about, because this is how we're going to study Revelation as we go through it. There is a timeline that follows through in Revelation that is pretty clear, and I want you to see it. Today we're going to start looking at the time of the churches. I'm not so much, as some theologians would call it, dispensationalist, but this is very clear in Revelation that we are in the time of the churches, if you will. And so there is this time on earth that, and 7 churches are indicated, they're talked about. And each church represents something that's going on in the world. So Ephesus represents backsliding. Smyrna represents persecution. Pergamum represents compromise. Thyatira represents adultery. Sardis represents the spiritually dead. Philadelphia represents evangelism. And Laodicea represents the lukewarm church. So out of the 7 churches, only one is really evangelizing. It's the only one that God says, well, you got it together. You're doing it right. The rest of them all have serious problems. Now, where we are right now is in this time period, and that's why we're going to take so much time to take a look at these churches and what it says about the Christians today. This is where we are. It's the time period where we are. A little bit more on that in just a moment. But that's why we're going to spend time, because if we know what the Bible says about what the church is supposed to be doing now, we know what we're supposed to be doing and how we're supposed to be facing the situation that's going on in the world today. So, Revelation 1, chapters 1, 2, and 3 talk about today's church. Then in chapters 4 and 5, it talks about what's going on in heaven right now. So, chapters 1 through 3 talk about what's going on earth right now, and chapters 4 and 5 talk about what's going on in heaven right now. We'll be taking a look at that. Then when we get into chapter 6, or actually starts with chapter 5, part of chapter 5, through 8, we see the beginning of all of these 7 events, these judgments that come along in a series of 7. And the first one is called the seals, the 7 seals. And every seal that's broken pours something else out on the earth. And it's just another judgment that comes on the earth. And the Antichrist arises. There's war, there's economic collapse, many unbelievers die, many believers die, earthquake and massive destruction. And then there's a transition to the 7 trumpets that's spoken about. That's in chapters 5 through 8. Then in chapters 8 through 11, which is the largest block in Revelation, there are the 7 trumpets. These are additional, these are more judgments that are brought along. And in those there's hail, fire, blood, 1/3 of plant life is burned. A burning mountain is thrown into the sea, 1/3 of the sea polluted, sea life is destroyed. Comet strikes the earth, 1/3 of fresh water polluted. Heavenly bodies struck, 1/3 of the sun, moon, and stars darkened. An abyss is opened where demon-possessed locusts are released. I think those are actually Canadian geese, but that's there. Number 6, 4 angels are released, and 1/3 of mankind is killed at that point. And then there are 7 thunders. Now, we don't know what the 7 thunders are. When we get to it, you'll kind of go, huh? I thought they were just like seals and trumpets and bowls of wrath. No, there's also a group of 7 judgments called the 7 thunders. But we don't know what they are. When John was writing this, he said, I saw the 7 thunders, but then I was told, seal that up. We're not going to talk about that. So it's really dumb to speculate on what that is, but whatever it is, it's apparently something that God doesn't want us to know, or maybe it's just so awful that He doesn't want us to know how awful it is. It's obviously some sort of judgment in 7 phases, but we just don't know what those are. The 7th thunder, if you will, then reveals the 7 bowls of wrath, as if things weren't bad enough. And then come the boils, sea life, more sea life is killed, fresh waters turn to blood, sun scorches the earth, the Antichrist is attacked, Euphrates dries up, and there's this great earthquake. Then it really gets interesting. Then there's the Battle of Armageddon. You all heard about the Battle of Armageddon. It's the final battle. It's also the shortest battle in history, because God comes in and just speaks, and it's over with. I love that. And so everybody talking about, it's going to be a battle, and all these armies, and they're going to be fighting, it's just going to be, and so forth and so on. But God wins because He just speaks of the winning battle. Then there's the judgment of Satan, which is in Revelation 17 through 20, and then finally the new heaven and the new earth, Revelation 21 through 22. Now,
on behalf of Dan Hurst and the Open Class, we want to thank you for watching. We hope it was a blessing.